Hello, I'm Kevin Lynch from the Geography Department in the University of Galway, and I'm here today on Balbriggan Beach, a beautiful beach here on the east coast, to see what sort of sand dunes they have, what sort of beach they have, and look at the coastal processes on it. So the one thing that I like to do when I walk onto a beach is see, is there sand, how available is the sand, and right at my feet we have a good wide expanse of sand here on the beach, golden sand, with people playing in the background and lots of space for sand dunes to grow and people to enjoy the beach. Sand is very important, and then the other thing that's very important are species, and we can see in the background here that we have plants and a lot of different types of plants and species, so that's looking really good. And then the last thing that we look for, the first thing that we're thinking about, is space. Is there enough space for the sand, the species and the coastal processes that go on, and the people that are using the beach, and can we all use it in a shared way so that we have a healthy beach that we can look into the future and be happy that it's going to be there for the future. We're here on the upper part of the beach where we have nice dry sand, and the expanse of the beach here in Balbriggan is about 20 meters wide. So if you look at the area where it's kind of wet down below there, and you come up, you begin to see dry sand, and from there back up to where there's some vegetation grown and people walk by on the walkway, there's about 20 meters. So there's a good healthy supply of sand. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about a beach. Is there a supply of sand? So it's coming from offshore, but it's also coming down along the beach and being blown down this way. That's the sand part of it. The next part of it is the species part, and here behind me we have some nice species that we'll look at. So why are the species that live on the beach so wonderful? Why do we really value them when it comes to coastal habitats? Well, the first thing is that they're out on the exposed beach. So this exposed beach, maybe not today in this Irish weather, but when the sun comes out it gets really hot on the surface. And then when it goes in at night, it's really cold on the surface. So they don't have shelter from trees and other tall things that might give them shelter. So they have to be able to handle the heat and the cold. And if you look at the sand, imagine pouring water on that sand, the water goes into it really rapidly and sinks down. So the water table is really far down. So it has to be able to have deep roots and access that water, or other ways of keeping water. If it rains on them, that they would keep the water as well. So that's another what we call an adaptation to living on the upper beach. It's also a very windy spot. You can imagine if you're visiting the beach, as soon as you come out on the beach, it's normally very windy. And here in the background, it's not a very windy day today, but you can see some of the grasses are blown there in the background, but down here low, there's no grasses blown at all because it's getting a bit of shelter. On really windy days, it can be more dramatic. But how do they adapt to that? So you don't see trees growing on the beach or any of those hard woody things, because they would just snap over in the wind, especially those recent coastal storms we had in Ireland. Really, really strong winds, they just snap over. So what the plants do is they just bend. So these ones here are grasses and they'll bend in the wind, that's their adaptation. But other ones, they just grow low to the ground and stay out of the wind altogether. In order to survive where there's very little water, you need deep roots. And so these plants grow very rapidly by sending roots down to access the water table that's really low. They also send their roots out along the surface or just beneath the surface. So like this one here is coming along the surface, and then a new plant pops up, and that's how it expands. But the key thing is that all of these roots, they form this really dense network of roots beneath the surface, and that holds the sand in place. The above part, when the wind starts blowing and there's energy in it, it slows the wind down. It takes the energy out of the wind. And because of that, then the sand gets deposited, and that's where the sand dune builds up. And so it's really good at binding sand together and giving us a barrier to the coastal storms and the energy from coastal storms that we get on the coast. And on some places along the coast, we have really big sand dunes, but the ones here in Balbriggan are quite low to the ground and will probably never grow above this height. So a little series of sand dune ridges are really good buffer to things like the train track in the background and the coastal path and the lifeguard hut and all those other things that we value as well when we come to the beach, the toilet block and the showers and things like that. So they can be very important for real small scale things like that and the big scale stuff like the railway line. Here we have a nice spot to show the diversity of plants that can live in the sand dune. So here we have our grasses, and they can bend in the wind and are nice and low to the ground. Here we have our flowering plants, so really good for the biodiversity. And over here we have one of these types that are really waxy on the surface, and that gives them the ability to hold moisture when they get it. And because of that diversity and other diversity, if one dies off at a certain time of the year, then the other one can hold it in place. And especially for the bees and the insects, that there are different times of the year when different plants flower and they can access them. And then at the end of the year, things like this plant here, the seeds on it can be a further source of food for birds as you go into the late autumn and into the winter. So there can be a huge amount of biodiversity. This is just a small little section of it here in the dunes in Balbriggan. In the past, the way that we would deal with coastal erosion, we still do today, but we're hopefully changing our ways to make a bit more room for nature and look to nature for solutions. So we're coming up with nature-based solutions to a lot of our coastal problems and problems in the city and problems on the planet really. So we used to build walls, we still do, and put in these things called rock armour, and that was to resist the force of the nature, resist the force of storms. And what would happen is the storm would come in, the energy would come in, let's pretend this is the energy here, and it would hit that wall and it would essentially bounce back. And as it bounces back, because imagine that's a wave, it bounces back and all the energy is going back out to sea, it starts eroding the base. So it's not really doing what we want it to do, and that's why we start looking to nature. Instead of losing our beaches, and a lot of our towns around Ireland have lost their beach. There's no beach at high tide because we put in sea walls and rock armour, we put it on sand dunes, we put it in inappropriate places, and so we've lost an awful lot. And what we're trying to do now is go back to nature and see if nature has a solution. So if you can imagine this little mound here being a sand dune, okay, this is a really quick demonstration. What happens when the same storm hits the sand dune? It absorbs it, so it doesn't bounce back, it absorbs it. And normally what it'll absorb it by, some of the sand will be taken away, some of the sand will be moved, so it moves around and people see that as coastal erosion, but really it's just coastal processes working the way they work. And it takes the energy out of the storm, and then in low calm conditions or small waves, those waves move it back on. And so here we have a really flexible, adaptive, nature-based solutions to coastal storms. Here we are down at the harbour end of Balbriggan Beach, and you can see that the sand is all ramped up against the harbour wall, and this is causing a safety issue because it's so easy for kids to come up here and maybe fall over the wall or fall onto the road the other side of the wall. And that is because if you look behind, there's actually just a big expanse of sand and nothing to stop it blowing this way when the wind blows. And here just a little bit further along the wall, you can see that the sand isn't banked up as much. So the reason for that, it still has a great big beach supplying sand this way. The reason for that is that we actually have some sand dunes and plants trapping the sand before it gets here. And so here's the view from back towards the beach where the sand comes up along here, but it's been trapped by all this vegetation. Here we are in the middle of the sand dunes again, and here's some nice healthy sand dune plants. This is lime grass, and some people don't like sand dune plants because, like I said, they're spiky and maybe they didn't grow here in the past and have come out and actually sprayed toxic pollutants all over them to kill them, and that's very dangerous. It's illegal and very dangerous. The other thing about the sand on the beach is that there's not much to eat in it for the plants. There's no nutrients, so they need seaweed to be washed in from the sea or different things to be washed in from the sea, and as that gets put on the beach, the plants can get the nutrients out of that. So seaweed is very important for sand dune plants. And then of course the species that live in it, the animals that live in it can eat the plants and break it down, and that adds some more nutrients as well.